right, hello, and welcome back to the Leadership Circle Live, where today we're going to have a little bit of a different conversation than we typically had. So I'm here with Jessica Kroll. If you guys do not know Jessica, you should. I always say that anything pretty that I've ever put on the internet, literally since I started a business back in 2018, Jess has touched in some capacity. We also had a really cool conversation about entrepreneurship several weeks or months ago. Who knows where the time goes? But Jess and I were having a really interesting conversation about the difference between education, just how we grew up educationally, right? I have a communications degree. I have an MBA where it was always very, singularly focused. And Jess was like, well, that's really interesting because in art classes, like everything was collaborative and everything was about feedback from the whole community. And it just started a cool conversation that we wanted to have live with you here today. So Jess, I'm excited that you're here.
Yes, I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah. So will you kind of frame up like the conversation we were having that made you like the light bulb go off of like, my education didn't actually look like that.
So we were talking about how a lot of people, women in the business world, like whether it's entrepreneurship or corporate or whatever, typically take a lot of like business classes in some capacity.
Sure.
And it's always about, whoever's teaching the class being the one with all the answers, and how you're kind of in competition with the people around you.
Right.
And that was like not an experience I ever had in any of my classes. Because my background's in art, like all of my classes were art design classes in some way. And it was always about like the teacher, professor, whatever was there kind of like giving you some guidance, but you did a lot of work, with the class as a whole, and you tried to get better together, and you would give constructive feedback, and you'd ask people for, hey, how did you do that? And like everyone would just kind of work together. And then when it came time for like criticism or like time to like look at what everyone had done, it was always about, first of all, there was nobody won, like nobody ever had the best. It was always just being in competition with yourself to do better than you had done before. And then it was always about giving feedback to the rest of the class about, this is what you did really well. Here's how I think you could do better. And then it was kind of up to you to decide what feedback you wanted to take to like just create what you wanted to make.
And I find that so fascinating because, yeah, I mean, even in communications, which is, a language arts degree, right? Still, I don't remember ever really, even maybe in some of like my advertising classes, it was collaborative in that way. But again, we were still almost pitted against one another in groups. So it might have been a group project, right? Where 4 or 5 people came together for something. And then, but like the groups were still kind of all judged against one another. So that was not your experience at all. Like you guys were never really judged amongst one another or like against one another.
No, I mean, I even remember looking at stuff that truth, like I was like, that's terrible. Like in my head, I was like, that looks terrible. But we weren't like, we were always taught that's not what you say. Like,
Right.
You don't say, hey, you're wrong. You say, hey, this is what you did really well. This is how I think you could do better.
Right.
And it was, never a competition.
Which is also interesting. You were also taught how to give feedback.
Yes. The compliment sandwich, which Ryan talks about a lot. So
yeah. No, and you want to know what's funny? I learned the compliment sandwich when I became a coach, like an athletic coach. I coached girls volleyball, and we had to go take like a kind of a onboarding type training about working with kids and all this different stuff. And that's literally where I learned the compliment sandwich. That was post college, right? So like had a degree and really learned about the compliment sandwich, which, you give positive feedback, you give opportunity for improvement, and then you give, and then you give well, compliments on the outside, right? So this went really well. Here's an opportunity for improvement, but I love this, or I think moving forward, this. So that's the compliment sandwich. But you guys were even taught how to give that, which again, I don't remember in any of my business classes ever being taught. And possibly maybe people who did like got into speech or debate or something like that were maybe taught more about how to have those conversations. But just the traditional business track in school, that really was never the case. And it always felt very competitive. So I would love feedback. So whether you're watching this live or on the replay, like, does this ring true to you? Like in your formal education experience, or even in your education in your job, were you ever taught how to give feedback? Were you ever, did it feel collaborative or competitive? Because it could also be me, because I'm such a competitive person by nature that, you know, everything felt like a competition to me. And maybe other people didn't view it that way. So I'd love that from anybody watching. So when you were in a situation where maybe you were teamed up with somebody who you were dramatically had more experience, or, you know, than that person, what then was your role in helping that person get better? Or was that your role at all?
I mean, I think that was everyone's role all the time,
Mm,
was to help everyone get better. You know, it was a lot of I worked a lot with a guy in one of my art classes who was like really, really, really good at painting, and I absolutely hate painting. And so like my painting class was like I was just throwing shit around. Like I just hope that like this counts as like I hope the teacher is like, yeah, cool, this is great, have an A. Um, but there was always like, I don't know, just working together, and I'd be working on it. And then, you know, he'd come over and be like, what are you trying to do here? And I'm like, I'm trying to get this blue and I can't get this blue. And he's like, oh, let me help you. Like he would just jump in and help me get what I needed. I also remember once, I really like this story. I can't remember what class it was, but it was some like non-traditional art class of some form. And we had to make projects or whatever out of just like objects that we found.
okay.
And I remember like we had to pick the objects, like someone else had to give us the object.
Okay.
So the girl who we were for a table, and one of the girls at our table, someone gave her plastic wrap, and she was like, I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to make out of like plastic wrap. Like, I don't
Right.
know. Anyway, she like went out and she just found like all this other stuff to throw together. She got like canvases and some I can't remember what it's called. It's some kind of glass. And she ended up making like this really cool like 3D art piece out of it. And it was because everyone was like giving her ideas. Like everybody's like, "Oh, well, you could do this, whatever." And like she ended up I think it ended up being like the coolest project in the class, and it started as she was like, "I don't know what the hell to do here."
That's so cool. That's so fascinating, because even in my MBA, so obviously my college career was quite a ways away, but even in my MBA, like I was an adult at that point too. I remember group projects, right? Where like, again, we were put together in groups and we had an assignment, but never where there was an opportunity to like swing over to this group and give feedback or that sort of stuff. The feedback always came from a professor or even a committee. Because even in my MBA, like your final presentation was a business plan and you presented it and you got feedback from the committee. But again, they were not our peers. They were a judgment committee that were judging us for a grade, not necessarily, you know, a friendly collaborative thing. And so I'm wondering if that's why when we you know, when we become business owners or we get into the corporate world and we start to climb the ladder, that like collaboration becomes less and less part of what we do, right? It's less collaboration and less idea sharing. And especially in the onset of business coaching, right? Like it's like, oh, well, I can't give Jess help on her project with her saran wrap or her plastic wrap because, you know, you have to pay me for that, you know? And I feel like that's very much what's happened online. And Jess, I know you've spent most of your online experience, you know, inside of helping us build the beautiful things we do at Be in the Room. But do you get that energy now from the space where it's like, must pay for information, must pay for ideas? Do you feel that energy?
No, not really,
No?
to be honest with you. Like, I don't know, I think it's just because I've always been
Mhm.
my background's always been in, like, just help people, like and, like, I mean, I like you I know I don't work for free,
Of
like,
course.
whatever, but if somebody, like, just, like, hits me up and asks me for some advice on how they can improve something, like, I'm happy to help them, like.
Right. And that's I so much of what we do and Be in the Room and why we think it's so unique is that we do that all of the time, right? It's when somebody's like, I need help with something. It's not a drop of a link to book a call to pay for something. It's genuinely, have you looked at it this way? Have you looked at it that way? Have you, in another life, I did it this way, or, oh, in the job that I had before, we do this. And so, but again, in my years of being in business coaching containers, that was never the case, right? The leader of the community was expected to have the answers, and maybe they supplied additional support for us in different ways, but it was never that collaborative, all hands on deck, brainstorm together type of thing. And I'll tell you a story about this. So there's a guy that I follow online. I like his stuff. I like his content. He's smart. He's fun. And he had posted some content around, he had created $100,000 offer in his business. And I was like, that's really cool. I would love to see how you constructed that offer. And what I think I was asking for was like, can you send me the sales page or like what's included? And what he sent me was a link to book a like half day session with him for like $1,000.
Mhm.
And I was like, no, 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 no. I was just, I don't need you to teach me how to put it together. Like none of that is what I was trying to do here. I was just really curious. Like how did you put that container together? What were the deliverables? Like my marketing brain genuinely just was curious. And I think that's where, I see the breakdown in collaboration. And anytime, I even had somebody do it to me once. She was struggling with her offers and I offered to have a cup of coffee. And she's like, well, I'll be honest with you, my budget's really limited right now. And I'm like, it's a cup of coffee. It's a virtual coffee. You don't have to buy your coffee. Like, I don't understand. But she thought I was going to charge her for my feedback on her offers. And I was like, no, I just wanted to have like a friendly conversation. Like, yeah, if you want to be in my inbox every single week asking me for something, by all means, we're going to have a conversation about compensation for that. But for a cup of coffee to give you feedback on something with somebody I have an existing relationship with feels so natural. But that's, I think the conversation we were having is why does that not happen? So what are some of the other things, Jess, that maybe you've noticed studying art coming from your background that feels very different than like the traditional business constructs?
So, I actually have a question
Yeah.
for you that kinda ties into that.
Yeah.
Do you think that it comes from so, like, a coach or, like, internet guru, as we call them sometimes, like, they feel like they need to have all the answers, and they feel like they need to be the smartest person in the room. Like, do you kind of feel that way? Do you think that's a thing?
I do think there is a sense of feeling like you need to have all the answers. I think it depends on how I've only been in a handful of business coaching communities, including my own when I taught business. And I very quickly realized I did not have all the answers and very quickly hired people who did. Right. So people would ask me operational questions and how to question. And I'm like, I don't know. So we hired somebody to come in and teach that in the program. Right. People were asking us copywriting questions. And I was like, I'm not a copywriter. Right. So I don't know if I ever personally felt compelled to have all the answers, because I taught one thing. Right. I also did not position myself as all things to all people. I positioned myself as a sales coach. I was
Mm.
going to teach you how to sell, right? But I wasn't going to tell you, how to design a website because I don't know how to do that. That's not my wheelhouse. I think it's in positioning, right? Of like, what am I supposed to get out of this? But I did have drama over what I would give away for free and what I couldn't give away for free because of people who paid me for it. Right. So the 30-minute coffee chat that I told you about, the woman who was like, what are you going to charge me to have to brainstorm with me? When I was coaching, I don't know if I would have even made the offer to have the cup of coffee because I would have felt bad about giving that woman free feedback. Obviously, I'm using air quotes, because other people did pay for my eyes on their business, right? They paid for my ideas and my insight. And so I don't know if I felt compelled to have all the answers, but I did feel like I couldn't just for free, for fun, out of the goodness of my heart, give someone an idea or brainstorm with them without feeling weird about it.
So, the reason I was asking that is because I was talking to, my husband, he's a
Mhm.
tattoo artist for those who don't know, and we were kind of talking just about this whole like art versus business thing too. And he said one of the things that he thought was kind of interesting, that I think is interesting too, is that it's almost like a huge compliment whenever you're helping somebody and they do something like better than you would do.
Right?
And so I didn't know if that was kind of the same thing, like if you felt like that was the same thing on the business side, like,
Oh yeah.
is it like a compliment or is it kind of like a like, "Oh shit, now I have to do better too," or like, I don't know.
I think it depends on how you're led, right? Like if you live 100% of your ego, it's an oh shit moment for sure, right? You're like, oh my god, now people are going to pay that person to learn from them because they're better than me. But like for me personally, that was never like I wanted my clients when I was business coaching. I wanted them to make more money than me. I wanted them to be better at things than me. Like nothing makes me happier. So Shelby Fowler, who I interviewed last week here on the Leadership Circle, she came to me. She didn't know boo about sales, right? And she crushed it in her business. And now she teaches the sales component inside of her program, which is the stuff she learned from me and other places and studied and all the things. And like, I love that she now teaches sales because
Mhm.
it was such a terrifying part of her business for her. And now it's something that she's literally teaching her students. Like, I think that's so cool. And I love that personally. I think other people would be very offended by that and like, oh, now you're teaching my material. Like, I taught you how to do that. You're charging people. I definitely think that happens. It doesn't happen for me personally. But no, like my clients out earning me, my clients having better closing rates than I did, like my clients booking more sales call than I would. Like, I personally loved it. But I do think that if you live in that ego competition space, that is scary for sure.
You're cool. That's kinda what I was thinking too, like, I know you're not that way, but, like,
Yes.
the norm, at
Yes.
least sometimes for me, like, I feel like people can get that way, like, they're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, well, that's my idea and you're getting all the credit for it," and, like, I don't know, that's just a
Mhm.
thing that I don't know, like, that was
Mhm.
never a thing that crossed at least my mind, and, like, I don't know, maybe other people felt differently too, but giving somebody an idea and then having them do, like, just something totally cool with it was, like it was just really cool.
No, and I loved that in business coaching, giving somebody an idea and letting them bring that to life. And so then people are like, well, Ryan, why did you stop business coaching? I'm like, because now I get to help whoever, wherever, whenever, why ever. I don't, it's not like, oh, we have to join my coaching program. You don't even have to be a member of Be in the Room. The woman who wanted to have that, I wanted to have that cup of coffee was just not a Be in the Room member, right? Like for me, it's just a way to share my gifts with the world. And so there's two things I want to share as we wrap up. One, it's the creative piece. So that is such an interesting thing when we think of like creativity and how it works. Creativity is, to get into the woo a little bit, it is about flow, right? It is about, just really allowing things to happen, right? Like you can't force an art project in any capacity, right? Just like, correct me if I'm wrong. Like you can't force a website, you can't force an email, you can't force a sales page, like you can't force a logo, like nothing creative can be forced. Is that a
No,
true statement?
you have to be in the right state of mind, like,
Exactly.
for sure. Because if you're not, it's just I
Right.
mean, you might get something, but it's not gonna be good.
Right. So when we go to creativity, to flow, right? Ease and flow, but then we go one step further to collaboration over competition. Competition is it's a scarcity mindset. It is the idea that there is a limited number of resources or a limited number of ideas or a limited number of whatever that somebody can steal your idea, right? Whereas collaboration is this idea that, yeah, the way that Jess is going to bring this idea to life versus the way Melissa's going to bring this idea to life versus the way I would bring it to life are all completely different. That's that like abundant, creative, connected way of doing things. And I think that business is very competitive and has a lot of lack. And some people are like, what do you mean lack? There's people making shit tons of money. But I'm like, but they're afraid that they're going to lose it, or they have to create urgency or scarcity to make people want to buy their stuff, right? Like I think it's literally two sides of that same coin. And that's why in art, because it's a flow process and it's a creative process, and all of you could have been given plastic wrap in that project and all of you would have brought something different. Like that's what's nurtured. Whereas in business, we're taught that it's like cutthroat and best of the best. And there's only so many seats at the table. And there's only 4% of female entrepreneurs make it to the 7-figure mark. So we got to cut down all the others to get there. I think like that was just kind of a light bulb moment for me. Like, oh, that's the difference between masculine and feminine energy. It's the difference between force and creation. Like that's it. And art is creation, it's flow, it's collaboration. And business today, as it exists today, is force and competition and making things happen. And that's why we're taught differently.
Yes. And I think we talked about this a little bit too, is just like running a business is an art.
Yeah.
So when you kind of shift from like, I need to, have all these numbers and I need to do this like this exact way into like, no, I can kind of do this the way that I want to and flow so that it works for me. Like that's where it goes from like stressful and
Yep.
overwhelming and competitive to like fun and growing it how you want to grow it.
Yeah. And we have been through both sides of that together, have we not, my friend?
We most definitely have.
Well, Jess, thank you for kind of inspiring this conversation. And again, I would love to hear from you all, either watching or listening or reading this on the blog, wherever you're getting this. Like, what was your experience educationally? Again, whether it was college or a master's or I don't, when you were taught about business, like what direction were you taught from? Were you taught from that creative, collaborative, work together, no judgment, no competition, idea sharing space? Or were you taught from this, one person has all the answers, my way or the highway, follow the blueprint, do the things, don't ask questions, compete, scarcity mindset? So I'd love to see if this was just our dichotomy, Jess, of our educations, or if this is something that other people are seeing as well. So as always, Jessica, thank you for your time, your brain, your expertise. And like I said, guys, anything pretty you ever see that we do, Jess has touched it. And I'm just so grateful for that. So thank you for your time and for sharing your experience.
Bye, guys.
Bye.